And according to YouTube, I am live. Good evening and welcome to Act One. Act One stands for A Canadian Take on Events. I'm your host, Gordy Canuck, otherwise known as Gordon Causey. And I see that Danny Copeman is already here, a moderator on the stream. He and Nancy, who goes by the username Eat Me, it's a username, both have a wrench, signifying that they have the authority to manage the chat so that things don't get unwieldy. Although that doesn't happen too often, it does happen on occasion. And Max the Wonder Dog is here, and I have a bacon treat for him, but he doesn't seem too motivated tonight. He seems content to curl up on a dining room chair and just curl up. Do you want to get a treat, Max? You want to come? You want that? Come here. Not too interested at all. Come on, boy. Come and get your treat. Throw it down on the ground. We'll see if he's motivated enough to get off his chair. Yeah, he's motivated enough. He got a lot of walks today. He ran around in the backyard. Come say hi. Come here. Come on up. Come see me. Yeah, he's maybe Max is camera shy. I don't know. Come here, Max. Come on up. There's Max, a worn out wonder dog. Oh, and still do this. He's a puppy, but it won't be too long. He's going to be a big dog. He's going to be bigger than Ken was. The biggest dog I've ever owned. And we were doing some work on stay tonight, and I've started to teach him to roll over. We'll see how we do. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Today is the 4th of December, 2025. We're just after 10. It's now 10:05. I've been running for a couple minutes, and we'll let Max go chill out. He wants to relax. I think he's tired after a long day running in the backyard. Took a pretty decently long walk. And I wanted to talk tonight about Exercise Pegasus, something that was brought to my attention by WhaleOilBeef, who is a frequent contributor to the stream. What are you doing? Sorry for the disjointed beginning to this video, but welcome to Act One, a Canadian take on news events, the most raw, bare bones, basic YouTube channel you're going to find. No production values, nothing special. Just one nearly 60-year-old Canadian shaking his fist at the cloud, pointing to what the news events that I see happening, often relating it to my Christian faith. Always have a Bible nearby. And there is a biblical component to this, I believe, potentially. Operation Pegasus. What is it? It's an exercise that took place in September, October, and November of this year in the UK. And it was a comprehensive exercise touching all levels of the British government and basically mapping out fictional scenario about the outbreak of an enterovirus, something that may transmit through swine, so may have a swine flu component to it. And that is particularly infectious and dangerous to children. This is all a hypothetical scenario being foisted, and various government departments in the UK, and that's all 4 countries of the United Kingdom, that is to say England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, were preparing their response for this fictional. How will you respond when, if this happens? And phase 1 in September involved an outbreak of this enterovirus. They give it a name, they give it a number, the same way we have H5N1 for bird flu. They gave this a D and then 368 or some numbers like that. There was an outbreak of this enterovirus, the scenario, on an island in Southeast Asia, and it quickly spreads from that isolated little island through a food festival and ends up infecting people in Singapore and Malaysia. And then in phase two of their scenario, the World Health Organization, WHO, actually declares a global pandemic. And in phase three, a national lockdown is instituted. And they ran scenarios planning for anticipated protests over mandated measures like social distancing, masking, and all the rest. And it strikes me that those of us who look at everything that happened with COVID and believe that it was rife with misinformation, rife with overreach, rife with all manner of atrocities being committed against the population. And now Max is climbing right up on the table. Welcome to life with a puppy. Get down. Get down. I can't encourage this kind of behavior. It'll cause me big problems down the road, even though it is cute. Come on up. You can come see me. I don't mind. It is getting late, and I do want to get to bed at some point. Danny had written, "Hi, Max." He'd written that before, but it fits now. Jumps right up on the table. He likes climbing up on the tables. Now, Danny's writing Pandemic 2.0. They must always show us what they will do before they do it. Predictive programming. This idea of softening up the population so that we will accept scenarios that otherwise we might question. It happened with COVID, and many will be aware of the fact that there was something called Event 201, which was a coordinated tabletop exercise between Johns Hopkins, famous School of Public Health, Johns Hopkins, the World Economic Forum, and the everyone's favorite Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which I guess is just the Gates Foundation now since Bill and Melinda Gates got divorced. Apparently, word has it that Melinda Gates was not too thrilled with Bill Gates's relationship with one Jeffrey Epstein, and that's been postulated as at least one of the reasons for their marital breakup. And then True Union Allegiance has shown up. Good to see you here. I see a number of different people here. I'm going to suggest that while the governments around the world are planning for what they are calling an eventuality, when you read about this type of stuff, what we're always presented with is the opinion expressed that another pandemic, it's not a question of if, but simply a matter of when. There is going to be another pandemic. That is what we are told. And we have Danny, who has written down when he talks about pandemic, and then he goes, oops, I meant, and then he takes the word demic and inserts the word plan in front of it. I'm being careful in my speech because I know I've had a lot of videos. I've had a number of videos taken down. It hasn't happened for a while. I think that YouTube and the digital sphere has kind of eased off on their censorship for the moment. My videos, even when I simply said, check out what Luc Montagnier has to say, check out Dr. Michael Yeadon, check out Dr. Byron Bridle, check out Dr. Robert Malone, and just check out Dr. John Ioannidis from Stanford. And I just put out a bunch of names and said, check out what these people are having to say. That video was taken down under the guise, they said it was medical misinformation. I didn't give any medical information. I just said, listen to these people, listen to accredited experts. And yet you have companies like Google and Facebook and what have you. You know, we have pink-haired fact checkers with their PhDs in gender studies who are censoring actual experts in the field of medical research and actual doctors. It's insane the way the world is going. But while governments are planning on in the UK exercise in this exercise Pegasus, they are anticipating closing schools. They are anticipating mask mandates. They are anticipating closing small businesses, not the big boys, the small businesses. And this news is out there, but you have to search for it. It's not going to be on the top of your news feed. It's not going to be on the nightly news the same way that Event 201 in October of 2019 wasn't on the nightly news. I only learned about Event 201 after COVID had already come along. And then some individuals who were in the know or were looking back retrospectively as well said, hey, check it out. The John Hopkins, the WEF, the Gates Foundation, they tabletopped an exercise planning for everything that we're seeing happen now. And one of the things they want to address is the potential spread for what they call misinformation. But everyone who lived through the COVID era knows that the biggest purveyors of misinformation, a lot of the time, it was government health officials, politicians, it was the usual suspects promoting the misinformation. They told us misinformation that it was a proven fact that SARS-CoV-2 originated in a wet market in Wuhan, China, when a bat and a human interacted. That was the official story. Anything outside of that narrow paradigm was deemed to be misinformation. We now know that most experts in the world agree that the most likely origin for SARS-CoV-2 was not in a bat in a wet market, but rather that this was an engineered virus and that the coronavirus lab in Wuhan, China was likely at least involved, if not the sole player involved in creating this novel virus, that they were part of it. Who knows? Maybe Canada's own Winnipeg National Biolab, maybe it was involved as well. Many will remember that there were a couple of Chinese nationals who were kicked out of the country just prior in the year or two prior to COVID breaking out. And things are freaky. WhaleOilBeef brought this up on the stream yesterday. I wasn't aware of it. I watched the video. He suggested I watch on an alternative platform that is far more liberal in terms of allowing free speech. It rhymes with Bumble or Fumble, and a Dr. Cowan. And then I subsequently read a number of articles on it that this is that their tabletop, that their exercise virus, fictional, hypothetical, is an enterovirus, that it has a respiratory component, that it can cause symptoms that are akin to meningitis and also polio-like paralysis, something they call acute flaccid paralysis, basically where your left arm maybe goes flaccid, weak, you can barely move it. Acute flaccid paralysis. And I am of the opinion that something like this is coming, but I actually think it's probably going to be more than one thing. Might be an enterovirus, like this, whatever, this variation of a swine flu. I think we could be hit with bird flu. I think we could be hit with a new iteration of COVID. I think we could be hit with all manner of different things to overwhelm the ability of people to think critically and to respond in a sane and rational manner. And then I think there are other components in this exercise. They were role playing out the potential impact it might have on the food supply if it is indeed carried by pigs, swine. How will that impact the food supply? How would an outbreak of bird flu impact the food supply? We're already seeing in Ontario, in the London area, They're killing, slaughtering in the neighborhood of 100,000 turkeys. They've already taken out 63,000, I think is the number, and it's going higher. And there was a CBC News article in the last couple days anticipating that that number is going to go over 100,000. And what's going to happen if we've got a disease uh, or multiple diseases all coming at us at once. And at the same time, if there's a disruption in the food supply, no one can get eggs, chicken, turkeys, whatever. And what if, there's swine flu? What if it's mad cow disease? There's so many different ways they can hit us. And I don't want to be Mr. Doom and Gloom, but at the same time, forewarned is forearmed. And it strikes me that we almost need the truth seeking community, those who try and look through all the lies that government promotes upon us, for us to tabletop have an exercise in how we will respond. And unfortunately, we're too divided. We're too divided for a coordinated response. And there are too many people who want to be the leaders of the resistance movement, and not enough people are willing to, work collaboratively. So I find it interesting the name Exercise Pegasus. Why choose a mythological Greek, Roman Greek, mythological figure, Pegasus, a winged horse or a winged horse? Pegasus is I don't know all the mythology on it. All I know, it's got something to do with Poseidon. It's got something to do with Zeus and magical creature, a horse with wings, typically portrayed as white. And when you go to Revelation chapter 6, right at the beginning, now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures say, as with a voice of thunder, come. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. And I know I'm not the only person in the world who feels like our governments now are no longer, of the people, by the people, for the people, that they are there as puppet masters to powerful interests, and their goal is not to rule for, by, and of the people, but rather to subjugate and control the population. And we saw that in spades during the COVID era with all the misinformation campaigns. Wear a mask when sitting down, but when you get, or rather, wear a mask when standing up, but once you sit down, you don't have to wear it anymore. Wear it on the airplane, but when we bring the food out and you start eating, then you can take the mask off because the virus doesn't spread when you're engaged in eating or drinking. And what is even more distressing is the number of people who were willing to blindly go along with this nonsense. Well, we all have to follow stickers on the floor because the virus only moves in one direction. So if we all move in the same direction as the virus, it can't get us. But if we turn around, then the virus, it was nuts. But people liked it. I even played tennis with a young man who is a lawyer. He had just passed the bar. So not an unintelligent individual by any stretch. Yes, Matt, if you're watching, I am talking about you. And I talked to him about the ridiculousness of the mask mandates, and he sought to rationalize it to me. And he said, yes, but by having everyone wear a mask, it reinforces the message that we're in a pandemic. And I said, if you need to engage in ridiculous machinations to get the population to believe there's a pandemic, I seriously have to question whether or not there really is one. And, uh, you know, I'm sure he wanted to fit me with a tinfoil hat at that point. And I know he rolled up his sleeve at least twice. And anyway, let me read what's being written, um, and see. Danny's filling it up as he always so often does, and I appreciate it. Uh, so he talked about predictive programming and the fact that these things are planned. And Danny then said, with respect to Mr. Gates, that there's a special place in hell reserved for Billy. No kidding. I think Billy is fully worshiping at the altar of Baphomet. I think there's no question in my mind. Um, and then Danny then writes that when they say it's an eventuality, they mean eventually they will release it. You know, it's not a matter of when, or it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And it's just a matter of when we release it. And then Danny writes that further. He says, because of OnVid, now when I hear experts, I think morons. Not morons, unfortunately. I wish they were, but these are quite often intelligent people. But there is within academia, within government, within large organizations, you don't want to buck the trend. You're not going to get ahead. Politics permeates our world. And so if everyone from the top down is promoting a certain narrative, you're risking a lot if you're going to counter that narrative. You could be out of a job, your reputation could be destroyed. And I'm sure there are a lot of individuals who just buckled under and said, I'm just going to go with the flow because the cost is simply too high. A doctor, they'll take away my medical license. There was a doctor named Dr. Francis Christian in Saskatchewan, a teaching surgeon and the editor of a medical journal, co-editor of a medical journal. So this is a guy who had climbed very high within his profession. He was on the faculty at the University of Saskatchewan. He was teaching surgical technique to young doctors, and he had the temerity, he had the gall, he had the backbone ultimately to question the wisdom or lack of wisdom of inoculating children against a disease to which they were largely at pretty much zero risk from. And as a result of his questioning, they took away his status with the University of Saskatchewan. They suspended his medical license. They destroyed the man, and you can check him out. He writes a Substack, and his name is Dr. Francis Christian, and he pushes back against so much of the narrative that was foisted upon us. And I think the powers that be recognize that if they're going to do a rinse and repeat, that it can't be a carbon copy of everything that happened last time. I'm sure it will contain many of the same elements, but I think what we're going to see is we're going to get hit from so many different sides simultaneously that it's going to overwhelm any it's going to overwhelm our ability to have anything resembling a unified response. Will they be even more heavy-handed? We saw what happened in Ottawa. We saw an elderly First Nations woman with a walker trampled by a horse. That's how far they were willing to go last time. If you don't bow down, and if you don't do as you're told, will send a mounted police trampling over an elderly First Nations woman with a walker. If that's what they would do before, we'll suspend the bank accounts of hardworking Canadians who simply supported. They were exercising their constitutional right to support a cause and to protest in favor of it, and they had their bank accounts suspended. I think the next round, assuming it's coming, and I do think it is, I just don't want to predict when, we're going to see an even more draconian response. We're going to see them go even further than they did last time. They know they've tested us. They've jabbed and jabbed, and they see how we get our defenses up. They know our weaknesses, and we have them, and they're going to exploit those weaknesses. And it's going to be a hammering. Anyway, going on. Denny went on to say, proven fact is a redundant redundancy. If it's a fact, it's proven. If it's proven, it's a fact. You know, it's like when Christians often will say forever and ever. And I always say now and forever. The Our Father prayer. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, now and forever is the way I say it. But a lot of Christians say forever and ever. Well, forever pretty much covers it. Forever is forever. You don't need to add and ever, you know, an endless amount and more. Well, I thought it was an endless amount. Anyway, language. Uh, and Danny has watched that video that Whale Oil Beef had recommended. If you go to my previous live stream, Whale put up the title of it in the first and I believe only comment, so it's easy to find. Uh, and then Danny makes the point that smokers, of which I am one, sadly, it's not the greatest thing, obviously, but smokers will probably be immune again, which is why they want to ban all tobacco products by 2030, or so I've heard. I haven't heard about them seeking to ban all tobacco products by 2030. There's something else for me to look into. But many non smokers are not aware of something that came out early in 2020, early during COVID, and it was widely reported called they referred to it as the smoker's paradox. And what they found was that in Paris and London and Rome and New York, major urban centers, the doctors and the hospitals were finding that smokers were basically non-existent. There were no smokers showing up in hospitals suffering from severe respiratory distress, so, bad COVID. And they that didn't make sense. It didn't line up. You would think that that a respiratory virus would disproportionately impact smokers, but instead the reverse happened. There were basically no smokers showing up in hospital, and it led to they named it the smoker's paradox, and it led to people speculating that nicotine might provide something of a prophylactic benefit. Within the cell, there's something called the ACE2 receptor, and the spike protein on the surface of the SARS-CoV-2 molecule. The spike protein binds onto the ACE2 receptor, and that's how it gains entry into the cell and then replicates and makes you sick. And the thinking was that perhaps nicotine in some way coats the ACE2 receptor and precludes the spike protein from being able to bind. And it should be noted, and I haven't mentioned it for a while, but I've said it a few times on here, and I'm not the only one saying it. Uh, Nicotine in of itself is obviously it's a naturally occurring component in nature. There's obviously nicotine is in tobacco, but it's also in tomatoes, in eggplants, in peppers, and in other naturally occurring things. Its highest concentration is in tobacco, but there is nicotine in tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, and it suggested that there quite likely is some health benefits to nicotine, and that I forget which school it was, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, one of the Ivy League schools did a study comparing nicotine, the addictive properties of nicotine when compared to heroin and sugar. And their studies showed that nicotine was not addictive, nicotine in of itself. Now, so why are cigarettes so addictive? I personally, non-expert opinion, I think it's all the other chemicals that they put in there. I don't think it's the naturally occurring nicotine per se, which might explain why when I used Nicorette some time ago, it didn't work at all. Because if you're giving me nicotine in the form of a gum, and if nicotine in of itself isn't addictive, well, then how is that going to mitigate against my addiction to cigarettes if it's not the nicotine that's driving me to smoke? I think there are a lot of components to why people smoke. Nervous habit, it's calming, it's relaxing, a lot of reasons. Uh, Danny puts this in every live stream pretty much. I think he has put in every one so far. Jesus is Lord and King. Amen. Um, and Danny makes the point, and this is very true as well, that you can have multiple PhDs and still be a moron. He knows at least two personally. I know one. I know one individual with their PhD who, uh, I if we were lost in the woods, he would be the last person I would get help from. Uh, and Danny says one of his two PhD holders who's a moron is family. Uh, and yeah, and then Danny's bringing up the international health regulations, which were updated recently. I forget exactly when, but within the last year. IHR, International Health Regulations, and Canada, we've signed over our sovereignty to the World Health Organization. No longer are they going to be suggestions that the World Health Organization is going to be making. Rather, their mandates are going to have the force of law. So if they say that schools have to lock down, Canada has no choice. We are following who WHO direction, and we have no choice but to follow WHO direction. Amazon, you can stay open, but the small business sector, we're going to hammer the heck out of you, and you guys can all go bankrupt, but we have no choice. That's as per World Health Organization direction. And this is contained within the updated international health regulations, which were only just recently updated. A few countries opted out. Israel opted out. The United States opted out. Slovenia, a few countries opted out, but Canada and most of Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, we're all in. We are, to use that old saying, we are screwed. And the only thing that could push back against it would be a unified response. You would need people coming together en masse, but the population is simply too divided for that to happen. And again, I expect it's not just going to be an enterovirus, as in this exercise Pegasus. I think it's going to be multiple. There's going to just on the health front, there's going to be multiple health scares hitting us all at the same time. And the possibilities for me include a new iteration of COVID, uh, seasonal influenza, the flu, bird flu, this enterovirus, who knows, monkeypox, Eastern equine encephalitis, swine flu, mad cow disease. I think we'll see a number of them coming at us all at the same time. And that's one component. So you'll have this huge multi-headed beast of a health scare coming at us, all these different pathogens. Oh my gosh. And then I think we're going to see an impact on the food chain. Mad cow, swine flu, bird flu. And I think we could see mass culling, and so the food supply is impacted. So, and the supply chain in general, and then throw in an escalation in global conflicts. The U.S. putting boots on the ground in Venezuela, some more blowups in the Middle East, or Nigeria, or Africa, Nigeria, Rwanda, um, Democratic Republic of Congo, the former Zaire, Taiwan, China, Russia, Ukraine, Poland, the Baltic states. We could we're almost teetering on the edge somewhat of, once the dominoes start to fall, are we going to be facing a situation? So we're going to have war, we're going to have disease, we could have supply chain induced famine. And then what happens is the government comes riding in as the white knight and says, we're going to provide for you, we're going to keep you safe, just do as you're told. Just get into these box cars. They'll take you to a nice resettlement camp. We'll get you all cleaned up and you'll be well looked after. And I think a large part of the population will go along with it if things are scary enough. And let's read on and then I'll wrap it up. That's going to be it for night. This operation or exercise Pegasus, there is going to be a written report detailing aspects of how the various departments within the various governments, how they are going to deal, how they are prepared to deal with pathogenic outbreaks. And that report is expected early in 2026. So there'll be something to talk about when the report comes out, provided nothing happens between now and then. But Danny is writing with respect to nicotine. He's referring to it as a nutrient, and he's inviting everyone to look up Dr. Brian with a Y, Ardis, Ardis, and nicotine on that other alternative platform that's a little more free speech friendly, Bumble or Fumble, rhymes with that. And he writes, it's the 599 extra chemicals they're allowed to add to tobacco. That is the problem. I agree with Danny. And Nancy is here and she's wishing everyone a happy minus 14 degrees centigrade, which is what I guess it is in Montreal. In my little corner of southeastern Ontario, we are around -8. Not quite as bad as Montreal. Montreal can be viciously cold. And then Danny writes that he's using ALP nicotine, and you wrote poachers, but I think you meant, okay, yeah, pouches as a nicotine supplement. And Nancy's saying, bonsoir, bonsoir, beauté. Good evening, beautiful. And Danny's writing an interesting thing. He writes down, we are 9 meals away from total anarchy. There's a book written by acclaimed author, fictional writer named Michael Harris, and it's called Second Sleep. And it's set in the year of our risen Lord, 1400 and whatever, in the 1400s, but in the year 1400 plus of our risen Lord. And when you start reading the book, you think it's the 1400s. You think it's, pre-enlightenment, pre-Renaissance. The Renaissance, the Enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, happened in around 1500. So you're thinking that this is just prior. But no, it's not the year 1400 AD, year of our Lord. It's 1400 whatever in the year of our risen Lord. This is the year 1400 after the apocalypse, after Jesus' second coming. And it's basically a mirror image of what life used to be like in the 1400s AD. And they're trying to determine in this book, there are individuals called antiquarians who are trying to determine what life was like before the apocalypse, before Armageddon, what was life like before. It's kind of like now. We look back on the pyramids now and we go, how did they build those things and what was the purpose behind them? Some people think they were tombs, but a lot of people think they must have had another purpose. I'm in the camp that thinks that they had some energy supply component to them. I believe that they were, in a fashion, power plants. And that's not an uncommon view because they're built beneath an aquifer, and the granite on the interior is said to be conductive, and the limestone, the outer casing stones, are said to be insulator. It's almost like a wire. And this idea that with a gold capstone, that perhaps they had created this was an early Tesla tower, and that Tesla was simply trying to reverse engineer the pyramids when he built his Tesla tower out in Long Island, New York, whenever that was, 1920s, 30s. Um, so you have this idea that we are given an answer as to what the ancient world, what the purpose behind the pyramids were, but were they really? Typically, the largest engineering feats that we experience in the modern world are things like like Hoover Dam, like our CANDU reactors. These large structures are geared toward a purpose, not simply as a burial place for somebody. And so I tend to view that, but I can't state it with authority or definitively that yes, indeed they were, and we don't even know how they were built. And so Michael Harris's book called Second Sleep, they're looking back at technological the technology we have, and they know the stories about people flying in the air, flying machines, but they don't know how they worked. And the church, the Roman church, is anyone who investigates the antiquarian question is deemed a heretic and is liable to be imprisoned and ultimately executed. That's forbidden knowledge. These ancient people with their technological marvels were not allowed to know what they were. And it's kind of an echo. A lot of people feel that there's hidden knowledge being kept from us about what the pyramids were really for. You know, and other wonders of the ancient world, the Baghdad Battery, and all manner of other things. So I don't know what got me going on that little tangent there, but if you ever want to check out that book, it's interesting. Second Sleep, Michael Harris, and in that book, this is what got me going on that little tangent. Is one of the antiquarians comes across a research paper being written by academics, and in the paper they're saying that the UK, London, is only so many meals, 8 or 9 meals away from disaster, that most households only have enough food to feed them for 2 to 3 days, and that what do you do after that? And if there's a technological and the paper that they're reading, and they don't know what the internet is, and they don't understand a lot of the terms, but the paper was talking about how everything is so reliant now on the World Wide Web, on internet connectivity, that if there was to be a catastrophic breakdown, that supply systems break down, that monetary exchange breaks down completely. And then what happens is you have a mass exodus from the cities, and people fleeing the cities because the cities don't produce anything. They have no arable land to speak of. And they got millions of people living in Toronto, but how much food is grown or produced in the city of Toronto? If there are any food production facilities in the city of Toronto, they need the wheat, the flour, the ingredients to make their products are coming in from other areas. And if the supply chain breaks down, if the internet goes down and logistical networks stop operating, what happens? Within 2 or 3 days, people start getting hungry and they start flooding out of the cities. Great book, and you can read it if you like. And then he had written, "We are 9 meals away from anarchy." And this is something that Michael Harris, in this fictional novel, examined. Um, and then Danny goes on to say, with respect to nicotine, that Native Americans had been using tobacco for millennia for curative properties. And then Danny brings up the Nephilim, which is referenced in Genesis, I think chapter 6. I'm not sure. Uh, those who from the heavens came, sometimes called angels, the Nephilim, that they came down and they took to wife the daughters of men as they found them pleasing to the eye and took them to wife, and they gave birth to the Nephilim, the great men of old, men of great stature. There's another passage in the Bible where I think it's in I guess Numbers. It might be in Deuteronomy. It might be in. It's when Moses sends the 12 spies into the Holy Land, into Canaan, to spy it out, and only Joshua and Caleb, I believe, are the only two that give a favorable report and say, we can take it, we can conquer them. If God's for us, who can be against us? But the other 10 are all frightened. They said, we saw giants in the land and we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. Nephilim, giants. And when I look at the in um, Petra in, I believe it's in Jordan, and you go through a long, windy cave. I've never been there. If I get a chance, I would love to go. You go through a long, windy cave, and you come to this huge city-like structure, and you see something carved into the canyon wall with a doorway that has to be 30, 40 feet high. And why would anyone build a doorway that high and the steps leading up to it? You have to be a mountain climber to get up the steps to get through this doorway, and it leads to questions. Uh, then Nancy is writing, I think, with respect to the Baghdad battery. I think they were meant as batteries, but the Egyptian government is very skittish about archaeological digs. Well, I think there's a genuine effort to suppress knowledge of the ancient I forget the word, diluvian. I think that's the word, antediluvian world before the flood. Although, if you don't believe in the biblical flood, there are a lot of people who believe that there was a, some cataclysmic weather event that happened that is echoed in the Epic of Gilgamesh, that is echoed in Genesis and the account of the flood. This idea of a deluge, and it's referred to, I believe, as the antediluvian. I might not have that word right, antediluvian world. And when Atlantis, these types of stories, was there a highly advanced civilization that got wiped out? I believe there was, and it's easily reconcilable with my Christian faith because of the story of Noah and the flood. I think that there was a highly advanced society. When we look at how far things have advanced, just from say 18 in the last 225 years, in the year 1799, 1800, there were no trains, no planes, no automobiles. There's a reference to a movie. No computers, no electricity. Life in 1800 was not too much different from life in 1400, from life in 1000, from life at the time of Christ. Yeah, society had not advanced that far, but just between 1800 and now, in just 225 years, which, you know, it's a drop of time. It's just a few grains in the hourglass of time. And look at how far the world has advanced now. We can now, thoughts fly around the world in the twinkling of an eye. We're got satellites orbiting overhead with GPS. We got little handheld devices. We got cars, and someone coming from 1800 to now would be blown away at how technologically advanced we are. And I also think they would be blown away with how stupid the overall population is. We've outsourced our brains. We don't think anymore. We have devices to do our thinking for us. So at any rate, uh, from the time of creation, and I do believe in creation, until Noah. There were hundreds of years there. How much did the world advance? I think it was more, probably more advanced than what we are right now, at least technologically. Uh, and then Denny's making reference to Tartaria, old world. That's one name given to it. Uh, and Nancy's saying that she's read stories that there's a room deep underneath one of the Sphinx's paws, and she doesn't remember whether it's the left or right paw. But there's been a lot of speculation about a hidden chamber, a buried chamber somewhere beneath the Sphinx. I've heard that, not about the paws necessarily, but and then Danny's saying there's also been speculation they've done some type of resonant imaging of the the pyramids under the Giza Plateau, and they found huge columns of some description. And as I say, I'm convinced ultimately that they were power plants. And I think Tesla was onto something with his so-called Tesla Tower, which was going to distribute electricity free the same way that radio waves go out, and all you need is a receiver to receive them, and then you can listen to a radio broadcast. That's radio waves. Well, my understanding what Tesla was going to do is electricity was going to flow freely through the air. You would need an antenna of sorts to draw it in from the air, and then it would power your lights, your electrical appliances, whatever. But the only problem was, if you're supplying it free through the air, how do you meter it? How do you charge for it? And so the story is that the tower itself was destroyed, that the General Electrics of the world, maybe General Electric itself, bought the patents and then destroyed them. And Nicholas Tesla died basically, as an obscure nobody and penniless. Uh, and And then Nancy's writing that something was big news this spring, but I don't remember what that was about because the uh, things get going too fast on here. And then she writes the Younger Dryas, Drias. And Danny's telling me that I've got the right world, diluvian, antediluvian world. We're in the post-diluvian world, and there's the pre-diluvian world. Uh, Pre-deluge, better way to say it. And then Nancy's saying there is Atlantis, but no one talks about the continent of Mu as old as Atlantis. I mean, I have my own views. I have my own views with respect to uh, Pangea, this idea of all the continents at one time having been one landmass, and then and I believe the deluge, the flood, was part of that. I think that is when the continents as we know them today formed. But what we're told by traditional science is that it was a process that took thousands, maybe tens of thousands, maybe millions of years, that it was a slow, gradual movement. And I don't believe that. I think it happened quickly. I think it happened in a matter of weeks or months. I think it was a very rapid spreading out. I think it happened with incredible speed, and that's my view. And anyway, Danny's saying he believes that Mu was near Australia, and Nancy's writing it may be Antarctica. There's so many questions. That's why I like watching some of Joe Rogan's stuff because there's the Piers Reese map. Not sure if I'm getting that right. The something Reese map, which predates exploration of Antarctica, predates when Western explorers had gone down and actually mapped it out. And certainly long before the ability of satellites to do, sonar resonant imaging to find out what is the landmass underneath the ice. But there's a map that was found and it gives an accurate representation of what Antarctica looks like under the ice, something we didn't have the ability to map out until the 1950s or so. And yet in ancient or in 1500s, 1600s, before this, before it had even been discovered, sailed around, there they had the Inca or the Maya or the Aztec, they had a map of it. Interesting. Lots of questions. Uh, and then Danny's writing that maps and history is written and drawn by the victors. History is written by the victors, although that's not entire. I don't think anything is ever entirely true, because when we look at this book, we look at the Bible, we have the history of the Israelites in the northern kingdom who were conquered by the Assyrians, and we have a history of it. So we have the losers writing their history here. And the same with the southern kingdom of Judah when they were conquered by the Babylonians and then ruled by the Medo Persians and the Greeks. And they wrote their history, even though they lost. So, uh, anyway, and Nancy's writing about the oldest known map, but that's all she wrote. The oldest known map. I don't know what the oldest known map is. Piers Reese map or something like that, maybe. And oh, yes, Admiral Richard E. Byrd said he found land the size of the US beyond Antarctica. I think he found like a hole. He went down. That's the story, that he flew over Antarctica, and that when he got beyond a certain point toward what would be like the pole, is he found a lush area, and I think you could go down inside and you get into this hollow earth theory. And Danny's writing that our history has been rewritten, and what we are taught is not what actually happened. And I agree. I do not, but at the same time, just because okay, our history has been rewritten, someone who says that will then say this is the real history. I don't think they necessarily know what the real history is. I think they may have elements of it, points of it, but I don't think anyone has the full picture. And then when we talk about hollow earth, that Nancy's bringing up, and I can't pronounce it, Argatha or Agratha. This is this idea of hollow earth. It's been around for a long time. Uh, and Nancy's further writing that it would be the underworld land. But I'm going to wrap up now. So, are we going to be facing? Uh, did this exercise Pegasus, does it mean that this is indeed planned? We saw Event 201, John Hopkins, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, World Economic Forum. They ran a tabletop exercise, which was a pretty darn accurate representation. They chose a coronavirus for Event 201. And then you watched, if you matched up Event 201, what they proposed and what really happened during COVID, the similarities were too numerous to ignore. Does that mean that this operation or this exercise Pegasus is going to roll out is there going to be, are we going to experience something like it? I don't know, because these tabletop exercises happen periodically, and the overwhelming majority of the time, nothing happens of them. They tabletopped something around monkeypox. Nothing ever came of it. So, or at least nothing has come of it yet. I mean, the timing of Event 201 was very curious. It was done in October of 2019. By March of, well, I think it was in February of 2020 that the global pandemic was declared by the WHO. And then it was in March of 2020 that we had near total global, at least in the Western developed world, total lockdown measures being imposed, schools, businesses, shelter in place, and all the insanity we lived through. And I don't think they could do an exact rinse and repeat, but what I think they could do is hit us from so many different angles with so many different diseases that people can't it overwhelms the system. And Danny is of the opinion that Pegasus is the plan. And he further writes just before that, again, he reiterates what he said before: Jesus is king, and that is the ark that we all need to get on board. That's the ark we all need to be, the ship we all need to be on. Jesus can be called the ark. Quite often he's referred to as the rock, the solid ground. That's where you need to place your feet. You need to place your feet firmly on the solid rock that is Jesus Christ, because this world is going to shake. I referenced it yesterday in the book of Job, where it says, man is born to trouble as the ashes, as the sparks fly upward. You look at a bonfire and you see those sparks going through the air. Humanity, human beings, we are as prone to trouble, calamity, disaster, same, same as those sparks from a bonfire, from a campfire. They go up, and the only way you're going to be able to navigate what is coming is to have your feet firmly on the rock that is Jesus Christ, because there are going to be so many lies swimming around that it's going to overwhelm the system. Everything old is new again. This happened before. Think about the people who were living in, Jerusalem in AD 70 or in AD 135, and their world came crashing down upon them. The governmental authorities came in and just hammered the living heck out of the population. Same thing's coming to us. These things repeat. There are two aspects to what is referred to as end times theology or eschatology. There are two ideas. There's one is this idea of a recurring, everything old becomes new again. And there's nothing new under the sun. Things go in a cyclical pattern, but then there's also the concept of an end to the ultimate end, the end. Not cyclical, but an actual end. And I have no doubt that we're heading towards a cyclical end, and I think the potential for it to be the actual end is very real. Anyway, and then Nancy's asking everyone to give me a thumbs up if it hasn't been done already. If you've made it to this point in the video and you haven't subscribed yet, my numbers are going down somewhat. I was up around 1322, and I've dropped 5 or 6. I'm down around 1315, 1316, and that may just be a matter of my content. I'm not putting out as much content as I used to, so it might be me. It also might be the fact that YouTube doesn't like what I have to say and is throttling me. That's possible too. I don't think my content has changed much. The production values are the same crap as they've always been. No lighting, mic, bare bones basic. That hasn't changed. The content, sometimes I'm a little more sharp than on other nights. Just life. I don't put a great deal. I just like injecting my voice into the public discourse. I like throwing my thoughts, views, opinions out there, shaking my fist at the cloud. Started doing it during COVID. Saw so many of my videos get taken down for going counter narrative. And I get the impression that nowadays what YouTube is doing is when they don't like the message you're spreading, they throttle you. They want everyone embracing artificial intelligence. My channel, you won't hear me saying that at all. I'm not going to encourage anyone to engage with artificial intelligence. Quite the opposite. I will tell you to engage more with your own, cerebellum. Use your brain. Don't use AI. Well, that's not the message I think YouTube and the tech giants want promulgated. They want everyone all in on pharmakia, what the Bible, the original Greek word for sorcery, the Greek word is pharmakia. And we live in a world where life is supposed to be challenging. We're supposed to struggle. It's not supposed to be fair and equal and, rainbows and unicorns. That's not the way the world is designed to be. And yet, we are whispered constantly in our ear that you can have it perfect. There's no need for you to be anxious, afraid, no need for you to have any anxiety. No, yeah. Your every want, need, whim, desire is to be satisfied. And so if you can't sleep, here we have a pill for that. If you're anxious, here we have a pill for that. If your legs shake while you sleep, we call that restless leg syndrome now, and we have a pill for that. If you suffer from any, if you're sad, if you're depressed, well, don't worry, we've got medication, we got pills for that too. Well, those pills, but you might say, well, those pills, they have side effects. Those pills cause weight gain and can lead to diabetes. Well, don't worry about that, because the side effects, we have more pills to deal with the side effects from the first pills we gave you. And I know too many people who are taking handfuls of prescription medication every day. And you talk about the whole, all of creation has been seduced by pharmakia, sorcery, because we can't deal with anxiety, we can't deal with depression, we can't deal with. You're hungry? Here, call this number. We'll have food to you in 30 minutes, or it's free. No need for you to suffer from any anxiety, any depression, any, that's what life is supposed to be like. We're supposed to learn to confront and overcome this world. But how can you overcome the world when you're not even willing to confront the world? When you're on drugs to take away the pain of this world, pain that is built into the fabric of reality so that we can overcome it. This world has gone crazy. And Danny's throwing out a famous line from the military. I heard this more than a few times during my military career: suck it up, buttercup. That's what they used to know. If you whine, bitch, moan, complain, suck it up, buttercup. Um, and Danny's writing all caps, the end is nigh. Uh, uh, and then he further says, Danny says that people hate the truth. Reality and the truth hurts. Maybe that's why they dropped. Maybe I'm not worried about it. Ultimately, I do want the channel to grow. I do like seeing the subscriptions go up. Yes, I do get that little dopamine rush in the brain, the little endorphin that you get when you're engaged with, and my numbers go up. And oh, it happens. I know it does, but being aware of it is important to me, because by being aware of it, I'm not going to be beholden to it. I'm not going to put out content that is chasing engagement. I'm not going to make that my ultimate goal. It's not my God. I've got a God, my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He paid the price. And so if my numbers go down, woohoo, I don't care. Um, and Danny or Nancy's writing that the last free food that she got was because the pizza driver messed up and the order was an hour late. So uh, she got an hour late and got to eat cold pizza. And I'm not going to repeat what you wrote after that. Anyway, or what Danny, his comment about he changed it from Pizza Hut to something that rhymes with hut. And I'll leave it there. Anyway, I'll end my video the way I end all of them, pretty much. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord God Almighty make his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord God Almighty, creator of all things, grant you peace even in this crazy world. You can find that peace. I invite you to do some reading up on, just forewarned is forearmed. So check into Exercise Pegasus, named after a white horse. And then you might want to look at Revelation. I think it was chapter 6. I closed the book at the start of chapter 6 when the four horsemen of the apocalypse. The first horse coming out is white, and Pegasus is almost universally always represented as a white horse with wings. So, anyway, we'll see y'all in a few nights, and definitely on Sunday night. If I don't do one between now and then, there will be one Sunday, but I might go live in the interim. So, take care. God bless. And fill the comment field down below if you watch this on replay. Talk to you later. Good night. Thanks, everyone.